Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast, Keep It Simple podcast. If you're catching this, you're with us for episode 13. And today we've got a special treat. My dear friend, very dear friend, Jared Middleton is with us. Jared and I have been friends for well over a decade. Most everywhere we go, there is mischief and comedy. We are not afraid to have a good time, but ultimately, above all, are brothers in Christ. And oftentimes, Jared will use the term, we are cut from the same cloth, and that is very, very true. Jared is over 20 years in student ministry. He has experience in pulpit ministry. Just recently has launched a 24/7 prayer movement in Dublin, Georgia, Lawrence County, Georgia, which I'm sure we will unpack that. Jared and his wife, Robin, have two boys. Caleb and Jesse, who are all boy. And so, Jared, welcome to the podcast. I know that you're swamped. I know that you got a 19-ring circus going on at all time, but thank you for making time for us. It really is a treat to have you on, man.
Man, it is great to be on. I did, when I was sitting down at the computer and I got on before you, and it was like, oh, episode 13. I don't know, there's that whole thing. So maybe this won't be a dumpster fire for you. Maybe it'll be some good content, at the end of it. But I've been looking forward to it, because we had this scheduled, and then I'm trying to think, something came up.
You were hunting is it Blackbeard? Have I got that right?
Yeah, and over on Blackbeard Island that I go to with some guys, and so. Yeah, just kind of good stuff though.
The timing of it, it's interesting. Our heart in this work is, to encourage people and the authenticity. A lot of folks are drawn to this idea of just hitting record, and whatever we lay down is what is captured, and it made Rev a little nervous last week, but our heart is to encourage people to connect dots and people relationally, and then to ultimately draw people closer into a relationship, or maybe for the first time to give this idea of a relationship with God and a chance. And so the timing in that is, to me, is curious. Certainly way early on, we had you lined up, and you were hunting in that. And so just have to trust that the timing of this, but I did, to your point, when I was prepping the invite to email to you the other day, and I saw episode 13, I thought, dum, dum, dum,
One or two ways.
Yeah.
It'll be epic in one form or fashion, I'm sure. So,
So, a lot of folks, I'm sure, listened to Brooke's episode, and we talked about you a lot. I really got to know Brooke through the youth workers network deal that you had put together.
Right.
I mean, that would have had to been, 2010 maybe?
Yeah, we're getting old, man.
Yeah, we're not young, dude. But your gift, I mean, you have so many gifts, but one gift is you are a connector of people, right? I mean, you that heart of connectional ministry, of getting people together so that they know that they're not alone. There's a lot of us that are in the same trenches that really, it's community is what it is. And so my first introduction to you was through those youth workers roundtables that you put together. Kyle, I think, was at Perry, and they hosted. And dude, you had people driving from all over South Georgia.
It was crazy, and it's interesting that you say that. So in 1999, talk about go way back. I was in college. Mm-hmm. And I did a summer mission experience up in Cleveland, Tennessee. And at the end of the time together, I've never really seen that in myself. And so at the end of the summer, they had all the interns in the room, and one of the leaders, Steve Roper, they went around the room and did a blessing service on people. And that's what he said. He said, So that was however many years ago.
Wow.
That is, I'm not great with math, but so, and I remember we were sitting in this room and I can close my eyes and be there. And it was the first thing that anybody really spoke into me that I took like to heart. And, the phrase was, he said, you have this ability to bring out the common good in a room, like people who are like in differing situations or even maybe on the edge of like going to battle, like whatever that looks like, and kind of like, and so I've just tried to, live into that over these years. And it's hard. Like I think we oftentimes put ourselves in situations where we think we're the only one. And I think that's in like everything we do in life, right? Whether it's our career. So that incident you're talking about, we were all youth pastors, and I was kind of voluntold to do it. We were doing it on a local level, and somebody in the structure of our church at the time said, "Hey, can you do this?" Like on the conference level, which was like all of South Georgia. And I was like, sure. And I was kind of surprised as much as anybody. And we just kind of took turns hosting it, and it led to some great times because we all saw like we're in the same boat, and it's kind of the same thing. We all see now. We're in different walks of life, but just how that plays out in so many facets, like whether it's like parenting.
Yeah.
We both got. I got 2 teenage boys. You got a teenager and one that's
They're both still teens. Yeah.
Right. Right. And it's still, I think we just, if we're not careful, we isolate, like we self-isolate. And it usually starts with the phrase, well, I'm the only one like this.
Or nobody would understand. Nobody can relate.
Yeah. I'm the only parent like this. I'm the only person, like this. And it plays out in a lot of different, you look at, people who are alcoholics or deal with depression or what, like it plays out just on so many different levels. And so I think that's, we're talking about community, right? I think that's kind of the first step in that for me is like not self-isolating and realizing like we're like, there are so many people like us. It's interesting. So I was at the 24/7 prayer gathering in Colorado Springs this year, and Brian Heasley, he's a part of the international leadership, and he's in this room of like people, and he was doing some kind of video with like the Archbishop of like England, and they were like, he said in his talk he's talking about how they were shooting B-roll for some video series or something that they're putting out, and he's like, so the video guy's like, hey, y'all just talk or whatever, we're not doing audio. We just need to record you like walking through this little garden area, or whatever. And he's like, what do I say? What do I say? And he's like, Brian's kind of like you and I, and he's like, I look at like the Archbishop of like the Church of England. And he said, I blurt out, I feel like I'm a fake, and everybody's going to find out. Well, that's one of my biggest fears. And he says like, this guy that one of the leaders of the Church of England like looks back and he's like, I feel the exact same way most of the time.
Yeah.
And, it's a perfect example of that. It's like we see people, we see what they're doing. People look at what you do from afar and they're like, man, it'd be cool to have my own podcast and do this. And they don't know the trenches of it, like the heartache of it sometimes and the late nights of it sometimes. But we realize we're really not that different.
And I think from that connection, in my own life at least, how many sincere friends I still have from that. So like you and me, George, Charlie, Duffield was in that, Brooke for sure. Victor Scott was around in that group, and so people that I still keep up with. That I still follow. I know where they are. I know what they're up to, and kind of all that stems from your obedience to try to connect people and foster authentic community. And then from that, so this is a great place to kind of launch.
Because I feel like all I did was order chicken and say, like, let's eat. You know what I mean?
But you didn't. Yeah, no, you kept us all. It literally was like herding cats, you know. But from that came the most epic trip, youth work-wise, church work-wise, I've ever been on.
And how Nashville is still Nashville.
So that trip, dude, and there were other national youth workers conventions that we went to. We went to different cities and did different things. But that Nashville trip, whatever year that was,
it was a riot.
Dude, that I still tell stories from that trip. With you, Captain Morgan, and people, and trying to get Brooke to go into the one bar and ride the mechanical bull, and just Charlie blowing out a sock, coming across the city from we were at the antique archaeology.
We were in the whatever that antique show is,
American Pickers. And
I had taken a good friend of mine, Catherine Ryder, still a dear friend, and so she's up in Virginia now. And Catherine, for those of y'all that don't know, she is this like super fit
triathlete
lady, triathlete, you know, kind of stuff and everything. And we're probably like 4 or 5 miles away from the convention center. Like it's a hike.
Yes.
And Catherine's like, I'm gonna book it on back because I want to get to this session.
Yeah.
And this is like the second day, so nobody knows Catherine like I do. And Charlie Duffield, you know, who would himself tell you he's probably not in the best shape at that time.
And he had on
a marathon runner now, but
he had on Brogans, so he didn't have on like tennis shoes or walking shoes. He had on Brogans.
Yeah. And he's like, Catherine had struck out, and I was like, all right, see you later. And because I knew I wasn't humping it, you know, back because I knew what was about to happen. I've been on trips with her before, like she's about to, you know, catch a gear. And she gets 100 yards off or a block away or whatever. And Charlie's like, I think I'm going to go back. I'm going to catch up with her. And he just tried. And I said not a word. And he gets off, and I look at you, and I said, that boy just made a mistake. And, we get back to the hotel room, and he pulls his boot off that night. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning or whatever. Like, blew his sock out.
He literally blew the what is that? Like the ball of his foot at the pad. The ball of his foot had just
like a blister starting up, and it was just like, yep.
Because he was so sincere. It's one thing that I love about Charlie. Before, you know, he's not like me and you. So before we ever went to the convention, he knew the breakouts. He had charted his course.
Yeah.
Like he knew what breakouts he was going to. He knew the schedule.
Whereas you and I, like, for our former bosses listening and admins of finances, you were your own financer. Like, we went to go, but we were also like, we could care less. Like there was a fellowship element.
Yeah. And the big room stuff was amazing.
And we took to heart. They always say, like, don't try to go to everything. Maybe you need to rest. And so we took that. We like followed them into that. And but yeah, he struck out and paid the price.
Yeah. And they're like, hey, when we get done with this breakout, where can we find y'all? Oh, we're going to be at the Zorby booth. You remember the Zorbies?
The little chairs.
It's like the world's most whatever beanbag, but it was a beanbag. Those things would just inhale you. I mean, you could get in them and just.
And I'm thinking like youth pastor mode. I'm thinking like this is the worst thing in the world to advertise, to buy, to put in your youth. Like, let's facilitate. Teenage guys and girls like in beanbags laying down on their, you know. So,
but Charlie straight up blew a sock out. He had that one foot that kind of kicked out to the side.
Yeah.
And that was the foot and he was trying to keep up with Catherine. And
so he had that, and then we had dropped jaw off. We made it back in record time from Nashville. That was a record haul.
Yes.
Yeah,
it was scary as what that was.
We were getting it. And I think we had dropped jaw. There was like some van problems.
You dropped us off at Riverside.
Yeah, and we were leaving, and like it started sputtering. So it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, or like it's super late.
Mm-hmm.
And some guys that had come that I know from Dublin, they went with us, and we're getting back on the interstate, and I was just kind of like, okay, whatever. So I just pegged it out, I gunned it out, and like sparks are coming out of the back of the van, like molten metal is coming out of the back of the van, and then it just opens up, and everything is like running fine. And one of my buddies, his name's Clint, he was like, what are you doing? I said, well, dude, like, who are we going to call from Dublin to come? Like, it's the middle of the night.
Yeah.
I said, in my mind, like the closer we get to Dublin, if the van's full,
Yeah.
and it ended up, it was like the catalytic converter had like clogged up or something. And we blew it out. And he's like, I've never seen one do that before. But
So
yeah,
that trip really did kind of spearhead. I mean, I'm not going to say a youth movement, but it certainly spearheaded a move in connectional ministry.
Yeah.
I mean, we came back from that trip. Big Mike Hernandez was on that trip.
Yeah.
Brooke was there. I was there. You were there. George was there. Charlie. And we came back from that long weekend forged. I mean, we were.
Yeah. And to this day, you think about it, like we're in different walks, you know. So you're in Missouri.
Yeah.
You stepped out of youth ministry, kind of like I did. wasn't expecting that.
No, not
I
at all.
went into the pastorate. Brooke's hanging on. Like
she's the lone survivor of that original group.
Well, yeah. So and then George stepped out of youth ministry, but he's back in youth ministry. And
now,
then, yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Yeah. That's awesome, dude. Where in Albany?
Yeah. So he's at Albany. No, he's at Porterfield.
Okay. Awesome.
And then Charlie's doing. He's back. He was a nurse.
Yeah.
So he's back into nursing, but he's still doing, ministry and mission. But yeah, like you said, and we all keep, like I talked to George on the phone this morning.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to him about like you every other day or something, like we're texting or shooting a funny video that two other people in the world are going to think are funny, and our wives are not one of them.
It's borderline inappropriate.
Yeah.
So we come back from that trip, and then our next kind of venture was licensing school, right? So, like, when I think through our relationship, I'm introduced to you through this youth workers deal, and it's one of those things that's like when you meet somebody and you're like, that's my kind of guy.
But so pause, because after the very first gathering that we had, the little round table is what we called them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, youth workers round table.
You called me out of the blue. Like we had met one time for lunch with like 20 other youth pastors, right? So it wasn't like it was just you and I one-on-one.
Yeah.
You called me out of the blue and you were like, hey, this is Ben. We met the other day. You remember this?
No.
And you were like, would you come lead a retreat for me?
Oh, you went to
we were at Epworth.
Epworth, yes, I do remember that.
And I was just kind of like, well, yeah, like, but why me? And you were just like, I was praying about it, and you came, you came to mind, and that is the moment. And so the thing that I see in you, and I tell people about you so often, is like when you say like I've prayed about this, like I've put thought into that. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, because there are people that kind of throw that around, right? But Ben Lee's not one of those. So you were like,
I'd forgotten all about that. That was a great trip.
That was a fun trip. Yeah.
I was always trying to expose our students to different communicators that were authentic, that were real, that what you saw is what you got.
Yeah.
But to change that voice, to change the life experience, same theology, but different voice, different experiences. That was a rhythm that we created early and kept in place the whole time. So then, licensing school. And that's where Jeremy Wilson, for me at least, did you know Jeremy before that?
I didn't know him at all. And you and I, let's just say it, because there's nothing that's going to come down. We got rope-a-doped in this licensing school. Like we did not want to be there at all.
Mine was Connor and Mindy were getting married.
Yeah.
Like that's literally how I end up licensed.
Yeah.
Because it coincided. So they got engaged.
And so those listening, like like we were in the United Methodist Church.
Yes.
So in our context, we had to go to this like we had to be licensed because we weren't fully ordained, because it's like one of the longest ordination processes known to man. And so you were doing that, and that's when I was taking my first church as like pastor. We had the same like overseer for us
district
in the
superintendent,
church, and he was like, y'all are going to licenses. Like neither one of us wanted to be there. Like we're in Atlanta, which neither one of us. My sister lives in Atlanta, and I'm just like, I'll go see her once a year.
Yeah.
And so we hated We had been, and we're in the bathroom, right? And Wilson comes up to us.
I don't know.
You remember this? We're on break. And we're in the bathroom, like washing our hands, and me and you are just like, we're done already. It's like day one. We've been there like 20 minutes, and we're just like, can we go home?
Yeah.
Jeremy Wilson walks up to us, who also had like a big full beard, and his is like
beautiful beard.
Duck Dynasty beard.
Yeah, beautiful beard.
And he's like, y'all must be Ben and Jared. Yeah, Rick told me to look for y'all, and I would know you when I saw you. That was our introduction to Jeremy Wilson.
Yeah. So what landed me there, I don't know if you even know this. So the timing of Connor and Mindy getting engaged and then them asking me to wed them, it coincided with DCOM, the District Committee of Ordained Ministry. So I go before this board, this DCOM board, and we go through, I mean, we went through that for years, right? Yeah. And so we go through the interview and we answer the questions and all of those things. And then you get to the end and they're like, well, do you have any questions for us? Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, I got one question. Okay. And I'm like, I got 2 former students. I love them. They're like my kids, you know, and they've asked me to marry them. I've looked online and I can get ordained at the Universal Church of Love for $30. Yeah. Is that okay?
I remember this.
And their faces, like, you could physically, literally see the color leave their faces. Like, their faces went ashen.
Blowing fuses.
And they were like twitching, you know, and they're like, no, under no circumstances can you go through the Universal Church of Love for $30. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, then what is the process? Because I had no clue. Yeah. And the next thing I know, we're sitting in licensing school at Candler in Atlanta. And if it weren't for you and Jeremy, I don't know if I'd have made it. If I got this, was it 10 days?
Yeah, it was like 10 days of.
And we were sequestered, like
you couldn't leave. Like we couldn't even leave for the day.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I don't think. Like if our wives had come up there, they would have been like, meet us for lunch. I don't think we could. No. And they were serious about it. Like, like you'll fail.
And we were in dorms, but it was school weird. Was out or something, and so we were in like these dorms that were just blank. It was like super institutional.
It was like we were in jail for 10 days.
10 days, dude, of like 10-hour class, 5 and 5 or something.
So like, and one day I had left my computer charger in the dorm. Yes. And on break, I was going to run over there to it, and they were like 90 questioning me. Where are you going? I was like, well, I left my computer charger. Well, make sure you come straight back. And I'm like, where am I going? Like, like what do you think I'm going to like? Yeah. You know, so
then we had that experience. So that was building on Nashville and all those things. So then you end up in pulpit ministry. Yeah. Like lead pastor stuff. Yeah. I'm still doing student ministry. And by that time, you and I were intentionally meeting together consistently, you know, making sure that I think you probably came my way more than I came yours, but we were meeting for meals and just very intentionally continued to build our friendship, our relationship. And that to that point, I mean, it takes intention. Yeah. People are busy. Folks have careers and families and obligations, but to make that relationship a priority, it's worth it, you know?
And that's a good point, because if you're not going to be isolated, it takes intentionality. Like whatever that looks like for you in whatever realm, you know, that is. I mean, whether it's a business relationship or partnership or whatever, I mean, it's intentionality, whether it's a, you know, a familial relationship of like husband and wife, or, you know, even parents, or, you know, whatever. I mean, children, we both got older parents that have had health issues and stuff. I mean, it's all about being intentional and showing up. If not, like, you're isolated, right? Yeah. But yeah, those are some of the people that we still, you know, forge back to and go back to and look on. And like, I could call anybody in that group. The bizarrest relationship out of that whole group is Brooke Kitchen. Like, I don't know how many, there's like I'll go. I went like a period of time, like every time I went to Warner Robins, like at random times. I was in the mall one night at like 9 o'clock, like
I remember. Yeah.
and like I look up, I'm like, what are you doing? And her mom or somebody's with it's somebody she's related to is with her, and like we're like hugging each other in the store, and they're looking at like what, like who is this person I've never seen? That you're like, like what's going on here? But that's the way it is. I mean, I call, George calls me, I call him, you and I, call each other, and it's just like it was yesterday. You were down, here. I think you could pull up in my house right now, or I could pull up, in your yard, and it would be, come on in because we're old friends.
Yeah. Yeah. The Preachers Riding in Cars episode that we shot, we were talking about.
It's gold.
We were talking about John and John the Baptist, and our folks here. So the folks from our fellowship, our church here, they thoroughly enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And there's still one or two people who will occasionally, out of the blue, hey, you talk to Jared? I'm like, yep. What's he up to? And I'm like, well, So let's kind of get into some of your story, and we can go back and start wherever you'd like. You have been in student ministry for longer than the average bear, and then rolled out of that into pulpit ministry, and then there was a transition most recently out of pulpit ministry and into prayer ministry. So there's a lot of moving parts and pieces and transitions. But let's start even before that. I don't want to run out of time. I do want to get to the 24/7 prayer movement. But let's go back, because there's some of this I know. There's a lot of it I know, but there's some I don't.
Right.
So let's just start with like a call to ministry. That's a term, a phrase that's thrown out a lot.
Yeah. We're going way back.
Yeah, and we are. But my point is, how many times in your student ministry career did you have a teenager or a young adult, 20-something, come to you and say, hey, Jared, I think I'm being called to ministry?
Yeah, and so you try to walk that out with them and process that with them, because and I'm relating that to my call and my experience, because that's what I did. Each time that happened, I was like, okay, what did that look like for me? So for me in my life, I had several youth pastors. Oddly enough, my senior year of high school, we said goodbye to a youth pastor that we had.
Wow.
That was kind of walking me through that. And then, so we were without a youth pastor for 6 or 8 months, which was like my first year in college. And I did community college. And so it was over that summer in between high school and college. We had graduated, and we went to Washington, D.C. on a mission trip. And we were working in a soup kitchen up there, and the youth pastor at the time, so that was like the last thing he went on with us or something. It was shortly in that fall, or so I can't remember the timeline on that, but we were parking like downtown, and so because of that, we'd have to go out there and put like coins in the parking meter. And so one particular time, so we're in the soup kitchen. Let me back up. We're in the soup kitchen, and we're like cutting up vegetables and stuff that grocery stores had donated. That were going bad. So we would cut the bad spots off and then chop the vegetables up and all that kind of stuff. And so 3 things I remember from that trip very vividly. The first was when we were in the soup kitchen. One day we had the little gloves on, right? And I flipped my finger back in the glove. So like the finger the glove's still sticking out, and I like whack that tip off, like with the glove off with my, you know me, like all the way back in high school. It's the same version, right? Different. Isn't that like a Taylor Swift thing for like are they Swiftie fans, right? Listening, maybe? I don't know. And I just remember like being like, "Oh my gosh, Jim!" And I picked my hand up, and he's like the knife's down there, and like the finger to the like the gloves on the table, and he just goes like nuts. And then I was like, "Hello, just kidding," and like he was like, "That's not funny." Like, I mean, the whole, just like you or I would have done to a teenager.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't be honest about Jim. It was his name. Like, it was kind of a tumultuous relationship. Like when he came, like we bucked him. Like I don't know what it was, and we just didn't see like who he was, like how much he loved us as teenagers. And there was some other youth pastor on that trip, and me and some other guys, we were just like, I mean, we were just doing teenage guy stuff. It wasn't like we were doing like hurting anybody, or I mean, it wasn't even. I mean, looking back, even now as a youth pastor, I'm like, there was nothing wrong with that. And Jim went in there, and like, I thought he was going to fist fight that other guy. He was like, "These are my guys. If you have a problem with them, come to me." And we were just like, "This is our boy." Mm-hmm. And it was weird because it was like he was on the way out, and we were, and like, it was like, man, I think back on that, and it's like, what a arrogant, guy I was, and so many of it, because it wasn't until he was leaving that we saw who he really was.
You realized, yeah. And
so the third thing on that trip, he got me to go out one day and help him put coins in the meter, the parking meter. And when we were out there, we looked over to the dumpster where we were throwing like the vegetables away that we couldn't do anything with. Mm-hmm. And there was a baby stroller there with a baby in it. And at first I was like, I mean, I'm from South Georgia. You know what I mean? I've been around, but, I was like, what the heck? Like, there's a baby in here. And then we hear somebody in the dumpster, and it's the mom, and she's digging through what we were throwing out. And I was just like, oh my gosh. So it wasn't in that moment. It was, we got back. I was set to go to ABAC, which is down in Tifton, Georgia. Mm-hmm. I was going into forestry. That's what my grandfather had done on my dad's side. He planted trees and, some other stuff. But so I was going, like I was set. Like I had all my classes picked out. I had written my check for the first quarter. That's how old we are at the quarter system.
Quarters, yeah. And
so we're back sharing with it to the church about it. And it was like one of these really weird, like out of body, whatever experiences that you hear about, and you're like, it didn't happen that way, surely, but it is. Like we got up and shared, and I was just like, and I was going through like a spiritual awakening, that whole summer, I would say, and to the point where I was like, okay, yeah, I'll live vigorously for you, like in my career, I'll give, and all these kind of things, and we were singing like the little last song that night, and then, I was like feeling God speak to me. And I know for some people they're like, what does that mean? And I think it's different things for different people. It's not necessarily all. Sometimes it's just a feeling. And I remember like arguing, like, well, if you want me, you got to take me, and just like grabbing the pew and legit, believe it if you don't, or what, it doesn't matter. Close my eyes, and we're sitting there singing, and then like I open them, I'm in front of my pastor, Shep Johnson. And he's like, so you're telling me you want to go into full-time Christian ministry? And I was like, yep. And I was like, what the, what is this happening here? And you want me to share this with the church tonight? And I'm like, yep. And ironically, my parents were out of town. They were both school teachers, and it was like the week before school started. So I was the last one out of the house, and I called them and told them. And it was weird because, not weird, those of us that have faith in things understand, but my mom was like, I told your stepdad, we almost came home because we felt like this was going to happen, because they knew after the mission trip. And she said, you don't know this, but we've met with Brother Shep several times because we felt like this is what you were supposed to be doing, and we were struggling with that. Like, we didn't want to push you. And I was just like, whoa. So then I called my grandfather on my mother's side, who's at the time was a retired Southern Baptist pastor. And he told me, he said on the phone that night, he said, I knew from the moment you were born that you were going to go into ministry. And wow, I've saved my whole library. for you. So this is like the dwindled. I got a bunch of them in storage, and I got like this huge, looking at it was just like, oh my gosh. So I went into ministry, and the youth pastor, we got a new youth pastor that year. It was when I went off for that summer missions experience. That was my first summer in college. I'd gotten involved in like collegiate ministry in college, and our campus minister, he challenged all of us. He said, I would just challenge you to give one of your summers as a college student to summer missions. I was like, okay. So I went to Cleveland, Tennessee, and this new guy, while he moves in while I'm gone, he starts writing me letters. I mean, old fashioned, right? Writing
new
letters.
Youth pastor?
Yeah, the new youth pastor. His
Okay.
name's Paul Radosevich. He lives in Alabama now. And he says, Brother Sheps told me all about you. I'm excited to hear that you're going into ministry, and I want to help you in that. And so he loved on me and grace and let me make a lot of mistakes and serve as an intern. And we led the youth praise band. We got that going when I was in undergrad there at home. He handed off the middle school ministry to me and a friend of mine and one of the parents. We were at that point where we were trying to split it. And he said, how about y'all take it? Do whatever you want to. Just let me know. Keep me in the loop. And, he wasn't like totally hands off, but he wasn't in there teaching.
Yeah.
And, dude, we went in there the first night. We had the kids, we had 10 kids in there the first night, just middle schoolers. And we were young and naive. And we were I can't even remember the numbers. I want to think it was 80 kids. So we were if you average 80 kids for 6 weeks and 80% of them have Bibles with them, I'll dye my hair blonde and he'll dye his hair green. And we were there's no way they'll do that. So they're at school the next day, making flyers and crap. Yeah, and my mom will take you to church, help us dye our middle school interns hair blonde and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So whatever the week, if it was 6 weeks, whatever it was, they hit it. It was boom. And we were down at the salon, bleach blonde in our hair. So it's just,
wow.
That's how he was. And his mantra, and it's what I leaned on when I've helped other people. He said, just try everything out. Try out, go work in this or whatever. And so just having those people, that goes back to community, right? Is that community is allowing people to be a part of the process, right? Even if it doesn't look, we're both parents. Sometimes letting our kids do it isn't going to be the way we would do it. Sometimes it's going to take longer. Sometimes it's going to cost a little bit more money, and sometimes the outcome isn't going to be what we would want. But that's part of it. And so, had I not had that, I don't know that I would be where I am today. So we went into that, and then I was at Pine Forest for 20 years.
Yeah.
Not
So
20.
how did you end up?
I was out there for 10. Yeah.
How did you end up at Pine Forest?
So Steve Patton.
I don't know that story.
Yeah, Steve Patton, who was the senior pastor at the time, my wife and I got married in 2005, and I'm from Louisiana. That's where I was born. So we honeymooned on the Gulf Coast. We came back, and it was a month later or something was when Katrina hit, and it punched New Orleans in the teeth, and that's where I was born. I was born right across the Lake Pontchartrain.
Pontchartrain, yeah.
Yeah, and so that was home for me, and it was that was my people, and so I was in Hazelhurst at the time at a church, and
doing youth work or
doing youth work down there.
Okay.
And the pastor there knew the senior pastor here, and he said, "Hey, we're going to go on a mission trip. I want you to go." And where I said, "Oh, we're going," he said, "We're going to New Orleans." And I said, okay. So we were one of the first groups in after
Katrina.
the deal. And wow. we were setting up food banks and stuff. And so we went with Pine Forest. And then so Steve and I got a relationship, and he was, we were talking one time, and their youth pastor at the time went to seminary, and he told me we're doing a spiritual, it's Emmaus, you know what it is, but for those that don't, it's just a spiritual retreat weekend. So we were working it together as clergy. I was still in Hazelhurst, and he was talking to me about youth ministry and just my ideas and stuff. And he said, "Hey, our youth pastor, I think he's going to head off to seminary. He was going to move off to seminary." I would love to prick your brain, whether you interview or just I pick your brain on youth ministry, on who we hire and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, I said, yeah, that'd be great. So in the meantime, when I was in Hazelhurst, somebody had just passed away and gave the youth ministry collectively like $1 million or $1.5 million. No, it was like $2.5 million collectively to the youth ministry. Yeah, like some of it was in endowments and stuff.
Yeah.
So there were like 2 endowments, and then there was like a chunk left to build a student center.
Wow. And
they were like, hey, why don't you be on the building committee? And then we get in the building committee, and I had done some work in college and stuff, in like a sports park, not park with like go-karts and arcades and stuff. So I had managed one of those. So I had some experience in that, like kind of area and stuff. And I look back at my life, and just there's been things like that like I shouldn't have had the opportunity to do, but then it's positioned me for something else later on. And that was one of them. And then we get on the building committee, and I think more, and I love them. And I would say this if they were in the room with me, I think more out of like the fact that they were like, well, he's on staff. So they were like, he can be the building chair. So here I am at like, 28, 29 years old, chairing a building committee to build like a $500,000 student facility, which in 2009 was like crazy. And they were kind of like, here's like, do whatever you want, like designing it and stuff like that. And we picked an architect that I knew that had family connections to. And it was crazy because after that building had been open for like 4 or 5 months. We hadn't even had the grand opening with the community yet. And I just felt the Lord saying like, it's time, bud. Like your time here's done. And I was like, what? Like, I just got to draw on a piece of paper what I wanted, and they gave it to me. And it kind of blew the church's mind, blew my mind, blew people. And even like friends, we didn't know each other then, but I had colleagues in youth ministry. They were like, are you nuts? Like, what are you doing? And then hindsight is 2020. That was when the stock market like crashed, right?
Yeah, 07, 08. Yeah.
And so the church really financially started struggling. And looking back, and the pastor who was there at the time, it was a different pastor. He said, it was good because he was mad when I left. He's like, I can't believe you're doing this. And he looked back. He was like, hey, like it made it easier for the church because I don't think the church would have wanted to say like, we can't afford you. But so I called Steve up out of the blue, and I was like, hey, I don't know why I'm calling you, but like, and he was like, man, and Steve is just like top notch. Like he's, if he's listening.
Is he the dude that we went turkey hunting with that time?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, he was like, yeah, I was hoping you would call. They had this position posted, but he said, and that was just his integrity. He was like, I wasn't going to call you and try to pull you away. He said, I'm glad you called. And I'd come up here a couple times and interviewed, and my wife was like, we're moving to Dublin, aren't we? And I was like, yeah, I think so. She was like, have they offered you the job? And I was like, no. Do you know how much they're going to pay? And I was like, no, but we're moving. And that was the conversation when they called and offered me the job. They said, we voted, we offered you the job. We need to figure out what we're going to pay you. And I was like, well, I'm coming. Now let's figure out what y'all are going to pay me. So that's how it happened. And I was there, it was like 9 or 10 years in that role. Really youth and associate. I was preaching every Sunday by the time I left, unless I was out of town with a youth event or on vacation. They had 3 services going on at the time. The church wanted me to be on staff there, like as an associate, as an appointed deal. And that's kind of how it worked in our system. The DS, which was the same guy that sent us to license school we were talking about earlier, he kept saying, no, you need your own church. And then he calls me out of the blue, and something happened at this church where like the pastor that was going to go out there, something fell through or something, I don't know the details. And he was like, here it is. And it was a really good first appointment. I literally moved 10 miles down the road because I had a parsonage. I didn't have to take a pay cut to go into ministry. That was one of our concerns. You don't want to destitute your kids and all that kind of stuff. And it was good. It was a great 6 years that we were out there. It was a smaller.
And you grew the church. I mean, through you, the Lord was so faithful.
The Lord was very faithful
in that ministry.
We did a lot of stuff. out there, and it wasn't me. You know, and I say that it wasn't me. It was.
No,
It was
yeah,
me.
yeah,
It
yeah,
was.
of course.
I know you know that. You know, I
Yeah.
just. You know, but we buried a lot of folks out there too. You know, so it was an older congregation. We buried a lot of people that I got really close to, and that hurt. I mean, you know that you're in that zone now. It was different when I was at other churches on staff because you're like a youth. You don't do a lot of youth meals. When you do, they're tragic, and you know, but you know, just a lot of people. So while we were out there, COVID hits.
Yeah.
You know, and we're in the middle of COVID, and that's really when I started getting involved with 24/7 prayer, and specifically the Order of the Mustard Seed, which is like a scattered monastic movement.
Okay, let's talk more about that. This is where I really want to lean into. Okay, so you had experience at some point, somewhere along in your journey, you had experience with IHOP. Have I got that right? Or
not IHOP.
Okay, what was
so,
it?
Yeah. So the 24/7 prayer, the guy who started 24/7 prayer and the Order of the Mustard Seed revived it. That's actually like goes way back to Councils and like way back to the Moravians.
Okay.
His name's Pete Gregg.
Okay.
So Pete, I had met him at a couple of conferences that he had spoken at, and started like he became like a paper mentor to me. Like I was just devouring everything he was putting out and everything, and he would talk about like this order of the mustard seed kind of thing, and I was kind of like, that's not me usually. And I think the first time you probably heard me talking about it, you were like, dude, like something happened to you, because that's usually not something you or I would be like, let's do.
So what is it? What is the Order of the Mustard Seed?
So the Order of the Mustard Seed, and it's a part of the 24/7 prayer movement.
Okay.
The way I describe it to people, they're two sides of the same coin.
Okay.
So 24/7 prayer is like this corporate expression, and the Order of the Mustard Seed is this personal. Like I'm taking vows. Like you take a vow when you go through a season of exploration, and you go through a year-long season of preparation where you're in a cohort together, you're reading things together, you're learning about the order, and like not just the order, but like the tenets of the order. So in the order, you take a vow to be true to Christ, to be kind to all people, and to take the gospel to the nations.
Okay.
Very basic Judeo-Christian.
I like it.
And which was, I was like, okay, yeah, I can sign up for that. And then within that, there are two practices attached to each of those. So when we talk about being true to Christ, we talk about living a lifestyle of prayer, celebrating creativity in the church and ourselves. When we talk about being kind to all people, we talk about practicing hospitality, and we talk about exercising justice and mercy. Okay. Those two are connected. You can't separate the two of them. And then we talk about taking the gospel to the nations. We talk about committing ourselves to a life of learning, because we can't go into the world if we don't learn. And I think that's a big mistake, because that's a whole nother podcast that we make. We just kind of go into areas and do things, for people, and it's not really good. Yeah. And then through learning, that leads us into mission and evangelism into those areas. So going into the order, you take that vow to do that, and you create a rule of life. Like, this is how I'm living those out so it's like I'm being intentional about that. So as I'm reading these things, and I'm reading about these prayer rooms and opportunities that are going on around the world. So if you want to know more about those things, let's go ahead and throw that out. So you can just go to 247prayer.com. Yeah. And then there's also 247prayerusa.com. So that'll take you more to like stuff on here in the States scene. Okay. But there's two books particularly, Red Moon Rising and Dirty Glory. Okay. Those are the story of how 24/7 prayer started. So Pete Gregg goes to Herrnhut, which is where the Moravians were, and finds out that the Moravians have been praying 24 hours a day for like hundreds of years. Amen, man. Like still to this day. Yeah. They really created the missionary movement as we knew it. Mm-hmm. They were sending. So in our world, we're Wesleyan in the Methodist cloth. It was the Moravians that John Wesley met on the boat. That's right. Yes. That drew him in. Yes. Really to a deeper relationship with Christ. He was kind of having that moment of being like, I think I'm a phony. Like
It's
believe
pre-Aldersgate.
yeah.
That's pre-Aldersgate.
Yeah. So he hung out with them on the boat to America. He had a horrible experience in America. He goes back and sees them again. And these Moravians, they're like in the lowest of the low on the boat. So they're paying their way over there by swabbing the decks and all those kind of things. And people are like making fun of them and ridiculing them and stuff. And they're like, kind to all people.
Yeah.
Being true to Christ. And then on one of those journeys, he sees them in a storm. Like, and everybody's like, we're going to die. Now, think the Apostle Paul, like the New Testament, they're like, we're going to die, like throw everything over. And the Moravians are over there just sitting chill, like
Jesus taking a nap.
Like, this is cool. So he sparks a relationship with them and then starts going to prayer meetings with them. And that's the Aldersgate experience that he has happened. Some of the Moravians went into the Caribbean, sold themselves into slavery.
On purpose?
On purpose, so that they could spread the gospel. And they only know about this because they quit sending letters back because they're slaves, and they go over, they send some people to find out what happened. And they're like, yeah, your people sold themselves into slavery so they could share the gospel.
With other indentured people.
Yeah. And so Pete, on his sabbatical, goes and he checks this out. And he's like, you know what? Like, if they can pray like this, maybe our church, he's at Emmaus Road in Guildford, over in the UK. He said, maybe our church can pray for a week. And that's how the 24/7 prayer movement started. So incidentally, it started, and now it's worldwide. Every major denomination is in countries. It started within, I can't remember how many months of IHOP, Kansas City. So there were like 3 or 4 huge prayer movements that people know of. Maybe they don't know of all of them, but there are people that know about International House of Prayer that don't know about 24/7, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. There's like 3 or 4 of them that started creepily in the same like chunk of time.
Kind of sweet.
Yeah, and so the impetus of 24/7 prayer is not, one of the, I guess the misnomers is like, do you pray 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? And you don't necessarily, do that. There are times of concentrated prayer, when you do that. So I was going through this thing in the order of the mustard seed and preparing for that, whether I take vows into this group of people or not during COVID. Like during the height of shutdown, I'm reading all these stories of, these different expressions of faith reaching people who aren't being reached. And I'm hearing people that are like, I can't wait till we go back the way things were.
Yeah.
And I started having just this inner restlessness of like, I don't know that I want to go back to the way things were. Mm-hmm. I don't know that maybe I'm being called into something else. So that's 2000. And I just kind of struggled with that. And it was this inner struggle that started. And then within our denomination, there was this schism thing going on that whether you know about the United Methodist Church or not, you can read about it. But the biggest thing that was going on was these churches talking about, do they disaffiliate or not? And what do they disaffiliate into and stuff? And so I'm trying to be faithful to my church to lead them through that, and do that with integrity and heart and everything, and still not really knowing what I'm doing, because I'm still processing. I mean, you and I talked about that. This was a couple year process for me, and I was like, what do I do with this? And but also in the back of my mind, I'm like, you don't leave your church in the middle of all this,
right?
I even knew a church that they were hiring a pastor during the middle of that. Their pastor had left before COVID, but they didn't have one yet. And during the COVID stuff, they were interviewing somebody, and I was talking to them at one of the local restaurants, and they were excited about it. And I said, you know me, like I just kind of say things. And this guy was like the chair of their committee searching. And I said, well, dude, the first question I'd ask is like, why are you leaving your church in the middle of a pandemic? Mm-hmm. Like, that's kind of, I don't know. Is that who you want, coming? And, so we entered into that disaffiliation process. Our church did of kind of working through that, and the church leadership, they said, we framed it as y'all have a decision and I have a decision. And I didn't know what I was going to do, and I said, which
is so taxing, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you went through it.
All the friends that we have in ministry and our kind of background, no matter where you align theologically on the issues, it's just so
wore a slap out. Yeah.
taxing.
Yeah.
And still is. I mean, I still have friends literally,
yeah.
I mean, that are just ground down to.
Yeah. And that's what it was for me. So it was this combination of like, man, I was burying these COVID and then this and then this, like you're burying, and you went through the COVID. It was like, it was polarizing in our churches where that, so all those things just wore me out. And I got to this place where I was like, I need a break and I need a rest. Mm-hmm. Right. And so
how does that look? I know how it looks in your life because I know where the story's going. For a person who doesn't step away from pulpit ministry, what does that look like?
So I think,
is it doable?
I think, and first of all, I'll say this: I did it wrong, and I say that I should not have gotten to the point that I got to. Mm-hmm. Is the way I feel about it. Looking back at it, it was mind blowing to me. That when I went to Portland in 2021 to the international gathering 24/7 Prayer USA, and I met a guy out there, and we were walking through stuff, and he's talking to me. We're having lunch, and I just look up at him, and I'm like, I got fry in the hand, wiping hamburger grease off my chin, because I was just like, I went out there to meet Joe. Like, that was why in my mind, I was like, if nothing else, I need to, I just knew this was like an ordained conversation.
You called me in the airport on your way home, waiting for your flight to tell me about, And
I just looked at him and I was like, so you're telling me I need to quit? And it was one of these like emotional vomit things that like I had been packing away, and you try to angle in your own life even and wrap around. And it just kind of came out, and he's like, no, I'm not telling you that. So this is the fall of 2021. So now I'm like, I'm dealing with this, and I get home and I process this with my wife and everything. And so the church is still doing their thing. And we had told them, we were like, we're not going to tell you what we're doing until you make it. Like, I don't want you to make a decision based on what I'm doing. And I'm just like wrestling with it. And still, even then, I'm kicking it back and forth and everything. And then, so finally, they had their vote, and I sat down with our leadership, and I was like, "Hey, I got to have a break." Like I said, I'm worn out, and I'm just burnt out. And
what was their response to that?
Their response was just pure graciousness. At first they were like,
"Is that what you expected?"
I didn't know what to expect, really. I was like, because I'm just like, what am I like? Who does this?
Yeah,
like, I got to. At the time, a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what am I, like, there's a part of me that's like, what am I doing? So I picked up, and when I was in Portland, I walked out and I picked up a rock off the street, and I'm carrying it around. I'm like, this is my I quit rock. So every time I'd have a conversation, I'm like,
this is my I quit rock? Really? Is that what you said?
Yeah. And so I just carried it around, and I would just pick that up and like, okay, this is like, I remember how I felt sitting in that booth with Joe.
Yeah.
I remember the resolution that I had in that. And so they, at first, they were like, do you need a break now? And I'm like, I'm fine now. Like, what I'm seeing is like, I'm starting to see warning signs that something's going to happen. There's not moral failure in my family, and my kids aren't like going to YDC or, whatever. I said, but I realized like, this isn't like the way I've been doing this is wrong. I'm burnt out. And, what role did COVID and a disaffiliate? Those are kind of once in a lifetime things, back to back, right?
Back to back, yeah.
So I don't know if you took those out, what my level of rest and all that would have been, and emotional drain and all. I don't know what to say, but I know that's what I went through. So, and then they were like, "What if we gave you 3 months off? Would you come back?" And I was like, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And I said, I really don't think I would, though. I think God's getting ready to call us into something else. And which kind of blew my mind. And through the whole process, they were like, if at any moment you decide like this isn't something we can't come back from,
which is a compliment.
Yeah,
that's a compliment.
And it was grace and love, and it was a gift from them.
Yeah.
Because you know how sometimes when you leave some, and it's not just ministry. I mean, even in a secular job, like if you say like, "Hey, I'm moving on to something else," even it's bigger and better, or it's just something else. There's a moment where people are like, "Okay, we're done with you." A lot of times,
I had never experienced that.
Yeah,
I mean, I really haven't.
And so for me, the crazy thing then became, ministry colleagues.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
The majority of them would say, "Oh, I'm sorry," because I'm like, and I'm taking a break. I'm taking a 3-month sabbatical. I'm sorry. I'm like, why are you like nothing's wrong? Why are you sorry? Like
it should be the norm.
Yeah, it should be the norm. And then there was a whole group of people that would look at me with just like tears in their eyes, and they would say, and if I like, you might not know them, but in my community, if they played this on the radio station locally, like if I named names, it would be churches and people that would blow people's minds. Mm-hmm. They'd be like, "Oh no, certainly not them." That they look at me with tears in their eyes and they're like, "I wish I could do that."
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And I'm like, you got to make it a priority. Like nobody would have done this. So for me, in that 3 months, I just shut down, like ministry wise. I didn't do anything. We put the 24/7 prayer stuff on hold.
So what did you do for 3 months? I know you're doing manual labor. I know that.
Yeah. So, I'm on a chain gang. No, that's what it sounded like when you said that. So,
sorry. I think when you get into the order of the Franciscans and going back through that line, the little brothers of St. Frank and the manual labor part, there's a part of that appeals to me, like this living primitively and sweating.
Yeah. And so for me, and I don't want to be controversial, the few times the Powerball in Georgia has gotten really high and I've gotten a ticket, I haven't won, so I'm not independently wealthy.
Yeah.
So I knew I had to do something to pay bills. I had done a lot of landscaping, a lot of irrigation stuff in the past. So I said, well, okay, I'm going to do this. I think we can make a go of this. And so I did that. I stepped out that in June, which is weird for landscaping because most people that have yard people already have them. But from then to now, every bill I've had has been paid. The business is making money, so which is it's very unheard of in the small business realm. So I did that. I didn't do any kind of public ministry for those 3 months. It was crazy.
How was that though? Did you know?
It was
did
odd.
You feel lost?
I didn't. It took me about 3 to 4 weeks for it to feel normal. Yeah, the first couple weeks.
Had you gotten to where you had allowed what you did to become who you are?
Oh, yeah.
Was there a point where it's like, I'm not a pastor, so what do I do now?
Yeah, very much so, because also my style of ministry, your style of ministry, was that, like, it was my life. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So, like, my kids, like, I would take kids with me to visitations if it was appropriate, and things like that. And then that ruffled some people's feathers, but I was like, this is who I am. This is the way I was taught and trained to do ministry. And so, sometimes we're on the way to a ball game, but we're going to come by and visit you. Now, if it was something, that they didn't need to.
Sure.
So it was very much a way of life and who we were and things like that. And so, it was very hard. But in those first couple of weeks, it did feel like I was on vacation, or something, like that. Like, oh, you'll be going back. So it took me about a month to be like, no, you're not. Like, this is it. But I had people calling, like friends, like the day that was my last day at my church. And like I was stepping into this sabbatical. So like people were like calling me. I bet I got 2 or 3 job offers a day.
Yeah. That's people because the human nature isn't like you don't really need a break. You're not really burned out. Yeah. You just want a shift. You want a job change. You want a salary raise or. Yeah.
And there were people in the community. I think there were probably even some people at the church that were waiting on me to say, okay, here's this job I've got.
Here's where I'm really going. Yeah.
But people would be like, hey, and like friends would be like, I get you, man. I know you need a break. Hey, do you want to come and be on my staff? And I'm like, no.
Yeah. What does it say about us? Keep your train of thought. What does it say about the North American church when the concept of sabbatical is so foreign?
Yeah.
That that people are like, okay, but now really what are you going to do? You know what I mean? That people can't be like, praise God, good on you, you get a break.
I only knew of you and I mean, I think hundreds, probably 1,000. I wouldn't say thousands of pastors and ministry people that I know, but certainly that I've met on a level.
Oh, yeah, sure.
At different things. I only knew of like 3 people who had done anything like I did.
Yeah.
And so it was like there was a loneliness and like, who do I reach out to?
Yeah.
In that. And so there was a Baptist pastor friend of mine, and he's older. And like I would have people, but that would be like, hey, I want to walk with you through this. And I'm like, how? Like, have you ever done it? No. Well, then I love you and I appreciate your empathy and your prayers and your support, but I don't need you leading me through open heart surgery if you've never done it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I didn't do any kind of public ministry or anything. And it was awesome.
Was it really? That was my next question. It's like, what's that like, man?
To be able to go to church with my family, to have no responsibilities. So we got plugged back into the church that I'd served at for like 10 years.
So you went back to Pine Forest?
Pretty much back at Pine Forest, yeah. That's what people were like, where are y'all going? And I'm like, I don't care. As long as it's like a Bible.
So is it refreshing or weird or both? Like to be in the room and not have to be at the front of the room? To come in and
a little
just
bit of
be
both.
Okay.
A little bit of both. So, and I've had this unique relationship with Pine Forest because when I stepped away, I wasn't a senior pastor stepping away. I was a youth pastor and
Sure.
like associate by and large going somewhere. But because I was in such close proximity, we had done a lot
very much a cornerstone of that congregation, though.
Yeah.
I mean, very much you were a major component of that fellowship.
Yeah, and to look, because like at the point when I came back 6 years later, there were students, and then I had been there for 9-10 years, so that's 15 years altogether. There were students that I had in student ministry that are now like back adults that are like serving, so that's neat.
Yeah.
To see, but my whole mentality was we had gone to church as a family that was dictated by where I worked.
Yeah. It's hard to work. It's hard to worship where you work. Right?
Yeah, I was like, y'all pick. And so our kids were like, this is what we know. So we went back there. And so then in the process, and I was kind of like, me and my personality, and I was like, and I had people that kept me in check on it. You were one of them, whether you knew it or not, and where I was that would like, no, you're not, you can't do that, because once I locked in, and it was like, okay, this is where God's sending us, is into this 24/7 prayer expression, because we were working on it anyway. That was going to happen, and it was like this collective group of people. And then when I was stepping away, it was like, okay, well, take this thing and let's really blow this thing out and do this. And so that's where we're at now, is launching this new expression of faith through 24/7 prayer. And we're doing it here in Lawrence County. So it's really a threefold purpose. One is just to catalyze prayer in the community. Okay.
Is it connected to any church?
It's not. So there are churches that are coming on board, and we're forming partnerships with.
Awesome.
Like this Saturday, we lead downtown prayer walks and stuff like that. We've led for churches prayer vigils that they had within their church. And so, can you lead this for us?
Oh, sweet. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Awesome. You reached out to me and you were like, hey, I got.
Oh, for our night of prayer. Yeah, we had a night of prayer. Yeah.
Yeah, y'all had a night of prayer, and y'all had a lot of sickness and stuff going on. You're like, and that's the thing about a lot of what we're doing. It's like kind of encapsulated by our conversation. You're like, I've got the knowledge to do this, but I don't have the bandwidth or the time right now, because you had so many people who were sick, and it was a night of prayer for healing. Do you have any resources for that? And I said, here's some stuff that I can send you right now.
And we printed and put it out, and the people used it and gave us feedback about how applicable, how much how it was dialed in.
So it's doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks ago, there was like 4 worship leaders in the area that they were like, let's have a night of worship. And so it was a really cool, beautiful thing. So on a Sunday night, they did that. And then they reached out and said, hey, can y'all lead our prayer time at the end?
Sweet.
We're each bringing like so many people from each church to be on the prayer team to pray. Can you like do a training session with them? And I'm like, yeah, that's all. We just want to we want to bless you. So it's catalyzing prayer in the community, equipping the church in prayer. You know as well as I know, like working in the church as long as I did, and you're in it, like you got good intentions, but sometimes you just get in the trenches of stuff, and it's just like all these different things, and we don't focus, on prayer. So it's like we're not trying to compete with, we're not trying to pull anybody away from the local church.
Yeah.
In that we want to bless you and we want to equip you in that. And then this third component is reaching out to the marginalized in society and building community, for them. They could be homeless people. They could be people that have tattoos up and down their arms, and they're in the skate community. I mean, there's a skate community in Dublin, Georgia. I know that sounds, you've been here a couple times. It's not a huge community.
Yeah.
But they're tatted up and they're, long hair, and they're the skate shorts and skate shoes. And while they might, and I think even a town like Macon or Warner Robins where you were, it would still be kind of odd to walk in. Like, they're not walking into a local church here. It could be, somebody who's dealt with drugs or alcohol or, whatever, and they feel like ashamed because
in that way, it's not like a fresh expression.
So they walk away, or they've been burned by the church. And so it's like, how do we create a space, a community, for these people in that? So there'll be a prayer room attached to what we're doing, like a house of prayer. We're calling it the Father's house. And so through that, it's reaching out to these people. Now, again, we're not trying to be the local church.
Sure.
But we're trying to create worship expressions that they would feel comfortable in, that probably even I will feel uncomfortable. Not because of theology or anything like that, but it's just not going to look like, it's not going to be Bethel and Hillsong and the songs that we know, because they're not in that culture in that. So one of the things we do, it's called Open Table, where the premise is, if you were here, you would get to come for free the first time. The next time you come, you got to bring somebody with you that's unchurched. And they bring something with them. It's like like a potluck meal, kind of thing. So if you knew somebody who genuinely didn't have something, one is like, it could be anything. I got a friend, their prayer room does it in North Carolina. She brings somebody who's like borderline homeless, she picks her up and brings her, because they don't have a ride. And they stop at the gas station and they get like the smallest bag of chips in the gas station. Yeah. Like less than $1. And that's what they bring. So they very much in vain with, y'all's secondhand, what's the blessing thing y'all just did?
Twice blessed.
Twice blessed, where it's to say like, you've invested, like you brought something to that. We're not doing this meal for you. You're a part of this. And I think that's a big element of community, in that is to say like, we're in a transactional society, and I think it is what it is. I don't know that we will ever not be in a transactional society, but I think maybe we're looking for the wrong transactions a lot of time in the church.
That's good.
And so I think, with our deal with the open table, it's where I would sit down, like if I bring a homeless family, my family and their family sitting down together at the table.
That's beautiful, man.
And we're eating together, and the transaction is community. And if I realize that everybody's created in the image of Christ, whether they're walking with Christ or not, maybe they're just in a burnt situation, the reality is they have something they can offer me too. So it's allowing them to speak into my life, even if they're homeless. Even if they're homeless, even if they're a drug addict. Because we're in community and they've got something. I don't have to take everything, in that. And then at the end of the meal, we break bread and just say, like if you were there and if I didn't know you, I'd say, Ben, thank you for giving your time, because you've done that. You've trusted me with your night and your kids and your family. I appreciate that. It's been a joy to get to know you, but more importantly than that, like God loves you. Like just hear that, like whatever walk, whether you don't believe or whatever, God loves you, and you break the bread, you hand them the bread dipped in juice. We don't bring them in there to preach at them or anything like that. But when they say, hey, what was that? well, I'm glad you asked. Here's this opportunity to present the gospel. And it's to say, this is why we do what we do.
Yeah.
In that, but it's creating community, and it's just like what you've said. Like, people don't get that; they don't understand that, and it's why we hunger for that. Even I think in church situations, it's like we don't get community. Mm-hmm. A lot of us have an experience, and maybe we're trying to share what it is. On some levels, I think about going back to our conversation in the beginning, like this roundtable deal that we did. Mm-hmm. For a lot of us in youth ministry, that was the first real community in ministry that we had, because we were like, oh, we're not alone. Mm-hmm. In this. I think back, when I was in college, you were asking about my call to ministry. There was like a period of time in the church I grew up with, there was like 8 or 10 of us that felt a call into ministry. Mm-hmm. And it was the same guy, Paul, that they did our own little small group and everything with us. And most of us in that group are in some form or fashion of ministry still. And it's like, we were young and like we would have charged hell with a water pistol. Yeah. You know what I mean? We were like, let's go. Like, we were so oblivious. Like, the world had not.
Which is a good thing. It's a good thing you didn't know.
Yeah, and it was a good thing. And then I wanted to go back to what you had asked. Had my ministry become who I was? Yeah. And it certainly had. So I journaled through my sabbatical time. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't know what I'll ever come out of. Somebody was like, you should write a book. And I was like, I don't know that I have enough wisdom to put into a book. But I also know there's a lot of people struggling like me who are in. And listen, if somebody's out, I don't want to think like the answer is to walk away from your ministry.
Sure.
But I will say, like, we got to not get there. Like, I was in like danger territory. Like the yellow light, check engine light had been on for a while, mm-hmm. and it was a quart low. You know what I mean?
You're just adding a little oil.
Yeah. And so, there was this morning, like as I was getting ready to launch out to the sabbatical, we had already moved back to our house here. Because we were trying to get all that stuff done, because we were trying to get out of the parsonage so they could get it ready for a new pastor and all. And I had this moment where I was like, what about, like, who's going to be, like, because that was their thing. They're like, well, who's going to be our pastor? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, that's not for me to decide. And I was just kind of like worried about them, and in my prayer time and different things. And I just remember very clearly the Lord speaking to me saying, like, Jared, I care about you more than I care about your ministry. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, that took me back. I was like, oh, like, your soul and your well-being and the well-being of your family is more important to me than your ministry. Mm-hmm. Not to say those people are that church or anything, but
no, sure.
As far as ministry, he's like, I'll take care of them. Mm-hmm. Let me take care of you, too, as well. So,
and that's what the people that we serve don't. And this isn't even in my current context, but the people that we serve, the ones that are for you and the ones that fight you tooth and nail on everything.
Oh yeah.
They don't. The vast majority of them do not understand that it's not a job. Yeah. Like that the things that keep you up at night aren't your kids as much as it is them, your ministry, your, that service and the fellowship and I've only been here 3 years. We're starting our 4th year, but I've called 2 of the senior pastors that I served under previously and said, dude, I'm sorry. Like, I apologize. There were times where I was really pushing and hammering for things in student ministry or college ministry. I had no clue. Like, I was hyper focused on my 2 lanes. Yeah. And had no concept that you had 30 lanes you were trying to tend to.
Yeah, and everybody thought that theirs was the most important thing.
Always. Whatever your lane is should be the priority. Yeah. But until you're on the other side until you're on the other side, I don't know that there's any way to know that until you're in it.
Yeah. And it's not, I don't know of another job where it's even remotely close. You'll have people like you'll preach a sermon and you're walking out of the church thinking like, did that connect? Or you'll see where it did connect with somebody. And you're like, I need to call them and check on them, Lord. Yeah. And somebody's like walking up and they're like mad about the air conditioner or something. And you're like, mine and your cloth that we're cut from. It's like, I want to punch you in the face. Like that is not what Sunday morning. Like call me on Tuesday. To complain about the air conditioning, or whatever. And so I think for me, as we talk about community, and we've hit a couple nerves, on that, but it's to say that like that idea that like my soul is more valuable.
Man, that's good.
Than my ministry.
Yeah.
God, it's the same thing with other people.
Yeah.
And so as I relate to other people, whether it's, and it's great. I got friends that I'll be talking to and like, we'll, like if we go like hand out, like, it was funny. The first time we did burritos, like breakfast burritos, and they were awesome. My kids were like, no, these are awesome. And I was like going around town, like on a Saturday morning, and I was like, hey, are you hungry? We got some breakfast burritos. Like, and these people would look at me like, I don't know you. What was that little bubble thing? I don't know what, is that like something, did you see that?
Yeah, I did. It happened a couple episodes ago. I got to turn it off. So my friend Gabe listened to an episode. It may have been me and Corey or somebody, but it did the thumbs up bubble. Yeah. And Gabe was listening to that episode the other day, and he sent me instructions on how to turn it off. I just haven't done it yet. Yeah.
So they're looking at me like, "Who are you?" Like, give me like a thing. But then it's like maybe then they're like, "Well, I'm not hungry now." I'm like, "You want to take one for later?" And they were like, and then I was like, and like most people were like, "Nah." And then I got home and I'm like, nobody wants to carry an egg burrito around in their backpack all day and eat it that night. They'd probably get so we went to peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. But it's that same, and like I'll talk to friends about, I was hanging out with these homeless people, or me and my kid were down at the skate park, and it's almost like that's what we got into ministry for on a lot of levels. And a lot of times you get sucked up and you don't get to do it. And so some of my friends, it's like, man, I wish I could come hang out. I'm like, come on, let's go. Like, let's go down there. And stuff. But it's that realization with them too. Like, so if it's a drug addict or whoever, like, I don't have the power to change that person.
Sure.
And I think we say that quickly, and I know you would agree with that. I'm not, but I think for a lot of people, we'll say that, but then we'll try to like change them.
Yeah.
And like really, as I was thinking about that today, it's like that's an attempt to elevate ourselves to a deity. Because we don't have that power. It's like, you know what, I'm going to trust the Holy Spirit in that. And like, if you're a drug addict at home, like I don't care. Like I still love you. And like, let's hang out. And let's break the bread together. Or I'm not going to skate with you. You can skate, with my kid.
I'll break my arm. Yeah. And so what you're doing, you're in, and this is, but in the cohort that I'm in right now, you are creating fresh expressions. Yeah, I mean, you're doing it through. I don't either. But I'm just saying. But that's exactly what you're doing. Like the more these guys that I'm hanging out with now, you would love them, dude. Yeah. You would freaking love them. If you hadn't listened to the episode with my friend Luke Edwards on here,
I'm going to go back. So I was telling you,
go listen to it.
Started, just so people know. Like I got to a point when I knew you wanted me on. I was like, I'm not going to listen to any because I just wanted to come in like raw. I knew my kid got it, and I knew you were asking earlier, was it work? Like, do I regret?
Yeah.
We were down at the skate park one night, and there's a guy, like an older guy like my age, that's into skating that my son has created a friendship with. Wow. So when they're down there, this guy's like showing my kid how to, because I don't know how to skate.
Sure.
And as a level, you support your kids and all those different things.
Yeah.
But we get in the car, and there's other kids that like come down there that, like, one day my kid was out there and with some kids, and like their skateboard was broken, and it was one of those little, I don't even know what they're called, one of the little
like
small
a penny board.
Yeah,
it's like a penny board. Yeah.
Look at you, the skate lingo.
Zeke's or Wick's into it. Wick's a skater, dude.
Caleb's like, "Have you ever gone down the half pipe?" He said, "I can't do it. My board's broken." And Caleb's like, "Use mine." And Caleb had just gotten like a legit skateboard. We had gone to there's a place in Macon that we went to. He'd worked with me over the summer. So he'd just gotten like a real deal. And I was like, dude, I was like, as a dad, I was like, dude, I'm super proud of him. Like that kid could have trashed that board and, broken it first go down. But then we get in the car and Caleb looks at me and he says, hey, could we come up here with a prayer room one night and cook hot dogs and just give them out?
Awesome.
And I was like, yes.
How old is he?
So he's 14. He'll be 15 in January. And I was like, yes. So when we got back with the leadership, with the 24/7 prayer stuff, I was talking to him and I said, so whatever pace they go with this, I said, this is theirs. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is our kids. So as leadership, like when we started, I said, hey, bring your kids. Like we all got like teenage kids. I said, let them be in on, like, they're the next generation of the church, right?
Yeah, they're the church of right now. They just don't know.
So let them be in on these decisions.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, as much as I want to jump in there and be like, let's do this, this, and this, and this. That's not me. It's like, dude. And he's like, hey, can I do like a Bible study or something, like whatever? Like, I will support you and equip you, and I'm not going to send him out there,
Sure.
What not being ready. So yeah, and it's thinking like that's community. Mm-hmm. Right? When you're giving these people a place to feel like they belong to something. So one of the people we met down there, there's a husband and wife. The wife doesn't skate, so we'd be like sitting over there, like talking. They got like bleachers and all. Works at Home Depot, and so I'm in Home Depot this week, and she comes, hey, how are you doing? And and it's like a genuine, not like, hey, welcome to Home Depot, and it's like, okay, there's a connection. Mm-hmm. With that person in that. So it's been a wild, exciting.
That you would never made if you were still in, chances of making that if you were still in traditional pulpit ministry are slim.
Very slim.
Because of the obligations and the,
I even told a group of people, so one of the things we do, like I taught a session on the Holy Spirit and prayer this fall at a church, like a 6-week session. I'm going to do another one for another church that we've partnered with. And they were asking, I said, yeah, this is one of the things we want to do. This is part of that ministry. You're not pulling, this is what we want to bless the church in that. So I was telling them like towards the end, and they're like all church people in the room, like 12 people in there. And I said, like, don't take this the wrong way. I don't like hanging out with people like y'all anymore. I said, don't take it the wrong way. It's like, I said, yeah, if you gave me a choice of being in here with y'all right now or being down at the skate park or down under a bridge with homeless.
See, I think I'm a both and, man. I love church people. Yeah. I think I'm a both and.
I do love them. You know what I'm saying?
If I could just sit with, like, I think about our men's group, Yeah. I think I'm a both and. Yeah. I don't know that it has to be an either or, but the non-traditional route to be in the street or to be off campus, if you will, forming and building and reaching and just that evangelism. There's some missional thread in there. It's like our church just this week, and this didn't dawn on me till today. So on Wednesdays we go and feed lunch at the local hotel we have this is year 3, I think. And there was a lady there today where we are in the process of helping her get her photo ID, which is, a difficult thing to do because you have to have all these forms of whatever, identification, bank statements or whatever. But she was asking, she was like, so I saw that y'all had a Christmas store Saturday, and then yesterday y'all were in town working at a voluntary action place, and then today you're here. Like, what else do you have this week? And I'm like, well, tomorrow we have Twice Blessed. And she was like, where is this church? It's a lady right now that's living in the hotel. And I said, we're about a mile and a quarter, up the road on the right, back to the north. And she was like, I need to come check y'all out. Yeah. I guess what I'm saying is it can be a both and.
Yeah.
It's just creating the time and space. I don't know what it was like when you were in pulpit ministry, man, but I don't know if the word is expectations. I don't know. It's an interesting thing to try to love your people well and still be evangelical, to still be missional.
It's hard.
Those two things don't always coexist well.
Yeah, and then like, so one of the issues for us, like the church was in a rural, setting.
Yes,
so the church
we
was
are
like
too,
20
yeah.
minutes, and we were in this like kind of little outset community.
Yeah.
So yeah, very much.
It's not like a downtown church where you were or where I was.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that had a different element, to it as well. But it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Hands down.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna have to wrap up. I've got to go meet a guy tonight.
I got a kid at finished basketball practice that's probably like, where's my dad at?
Where is Dad?
Yeah. But so a couple, if you want to tag my email, in this, and so I would say anybody who like is struggling with burnout or sabbatical, I would certainly love to talk to you. Or anybody in this area, we were talking about that earlier, that sometimes these things cross over. But I would say, so check out like 24/7 Prayer, and 24/7prayerusa.com. And there's a couple resources with that, and I'll shoot you some the links on these, so if you want to include them in there. One of the things when I talk about 24/7 prayer, people are like, I don't know. So right as the pandemic was kicking off, we launched the 24/7 prayer movement launched a app, a daily devotional app called Lectio 365.
Yeah, I use it every day.
Yeah, and that's a 24/7 prayer.
I didn't know that, but I use Lectio.
Oh, that's y'all.
Yeah.
And so, but there's also one called Inner Room.
Okay.
And it's a personal prayer app, so you can go in there and you can like customize it to. Like I could throw Ben, like I've got you in there, and like if we're ever talking, you're like, hey man, pray for this for me. I can put it in there. So if I'm ever got 15 minutes, I'll say, I'm gonna go through the prayer list, or set prompts so that it reminds me.
Yeah.
In that. So those resources are certainly. I
didn't know Lectio was y'all. I use it every day, twice a day.
That's a lot of things. Like a lot.
It is solid, man.
I was preaching at a church in Metter the other day, and their pastor
because everything's better.
Yeah, in Metter.
Yeah.
And he's like, tell them about. I just realized like I zoomed in the head on that. I'm not used to this world. But he was like, tell them about your prayer stuff too. That they're into that kind of thing. And I was like, anybody heard about 24/7 prayer? And then, not a lot had. And then afterwards, he said some guy came up and he's like, man, that reminds me. Have you ever heard this app? It's called Lectio 365. And I was like, yeah, that's one of the resources. He's like, oh, and then like everybody standing around, they were like, yeah, we know what that is. Like, we use that. So it's those kind of things and resourcing and equipping. So yeah. Dude, this has been awesome, though.
Yeah, I'm glad that you came on. We're going to have to get you back. There's a lot that we didn't get to.
Oh, so I do have to because I told you yesterday that's something that came up. So we haven't gotten like official wording or anything like that. But just the fact that somebody reached out and was willing. I was talking to a guy downtown at a Baptist church. He's like, well, so where are y'all doing all this stuff now? And I was like, we're a homeless house of prayer, which is ironic, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, could y'all use this old Catholic church?
Oh, cool, dude.
And I was like, yeah. Like, is that? And he said, yeah. He said, I'm on our church leadership. I'll talk to them. Like, we'll set this up. And I was like, the Catholic church had rebuilt a bigger church on the edge of town. So this church bought it because it was just like on the corner of their campus, but they haven't had anything to do with it. And I'm like, if that's not the ecumenical nature of the church, a Baptist guy wanting to give a Methodist an old Catholic church, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been good stuff and a wild ride in that. But I'll shoot you those links, and then we'll we'll go from there.
Yeah, there'll be some folks reach out. One of the beautiful things about this podcast, this is only episode 13, but I have people from here who are reaching out, wanting to know people from theirs contact information and vice versa.
Right.
And so there's this cross-pollination of people who are hardwired like we are.
Yeah.
Who are connecting, some from the Midwest and some from the Southeast.
Yeah.
And so I would expect that there will be some reach out. The other thing, we are beginning to pray into and dream into a Simplify retreat.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit.
So think about like a youth retreat, but for adults. So when that comes to pass, when that manifests, we'll have you teach and speak, and
that'd be great.
We'll incorporate that 24/7 movement, prayer movement into that. But awesome, dude. Thank you. So I end every episode with this question. It's the Keep It Simple podcast.
Yeah.
So how do you keep things simple?
I just try to hunker back to like, what is the premise of this? So, whatever I'm doing. So like even in my business, right? This new business I got, it's easy to jump out and be like, oh, I can do that and make money. I can do that. I can all of a sudden it's like, I thought you were a landscaping business and you're doing like quilted pillows. You know what I'm saying? Or like you're selling muffins. So like the thing I tell people, like potential clients, I just tell them, I said, so my, and I got this from you, like, what's your elevator speech?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, so for me, the elevator speech, and it's not even a speech, it's, we create and maintain outdoor living spaces.
Perfect.
So if you walk outside, call me. And if I can't do it, I'll tell you. But you don't need to call a lighting guy, an irrigation guy, and a flower guy, and a tree guy. Like, I got you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing with the prayer. It's like with the prayer house and the prayer movement. It's like, how do I catalyze prayer? Equip people in prayer and reach the marginalized. Like if I'm not doing that, I don't want to do it. Yeah. Like even if I'm doing something, and sometimes it's doing those things, but doing them for the wrong reasons or for the wrong motives.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's like coming back to that. So 24/7 prayer. It's about prayer, mission, and justice.
Mm-hmm.
So we're people of prayer, and prayer drives us into mission. And when we're in true mission, which is community with people, it drives us into seeking out justice for them.
So core values. Yeah,
those core values. Like what's the core value? Like what do we hold to as a family? What do we hold to as a business? What do we hold to as a ministry? And these things. And if it's not that, like it's fine and it may be great. And maybe I even do it, but like it's not going to be a priority, for me. And it may be something that I come and participate in, but I'm not going to put my energy in, to doing it.
Yeah. That's something that's new to me just in this past year is what is essential and what is not essential.
Yeah.
Is this essential to communicating the gospel of Jesus?
Yeah.
Or is it not?
And I think for me, and my heart is really for people who are burnt out. So, I can't understate that enough. If that's where you reach out to me and I'll help you, and I can. And along the same lines, if I can equip you or help you with a prayer resource, even if you're not in my community, reach out to me. But I think that's why I got to where I was. And I think that's why we get burnt out because we start doing all these non-essential things.
Yeah.
And sometimes we find our identity in them because sometimes they got like a greater return.
They feel good.
Ministry,
I'm with you. Yeah.
Ministry and community is a slow burn.
Yeah.
And
it's
sometimes
a marathon.
The instant results.
Yeah.
And because of that, sometimes it's like, well, let's do this flashy thing over here.
Yeah.
And it's like I could care less, about that.
We need to simplify.
Yeah. Keep it simple, right?
Keep it simple, man. Okay, brother. Thank you. You have been a gift, a blessing. You always are. I appreciate you. We'll be home. We come home. We drive through the day on the 25th of December.
Okay.
And we'll be in Middle Georgia through January 1.
Awesome.
Let's try to hook up.
Sounds good.
All right, brother. I love you.
Take care, brother. Love you, man. Did I get
See
the little,
ya.
how does the little bubble thing? Like, what is that?
I don't know.
Was it a facial recognition or like, what is that?
I don't know.
I don't know, man.
Okay, Jared. Say bye.
Bye.